I ran for political office successfully on one issue, cracking down on human trafficking, in large part through the Asian themed 24-hour spas that existed in my community that I never even realized were there until going out one night, having to go to a local news station, and realizing in the few miles between my house and the news station, I passed several of them. All of them were open with customers after 10 o'clock at night, and I was perplexed. Started doing research and realized what's going on. More often than not, they're not massage parlors, they are houses of prostitution. They are brothels. It is impolite, I guess, at this point to talk about because of the shooter in Atlanta who shot up the Asian massage parlor, but he claims he did it not out of anti-Asian hate, but because he had a sex addiction and was going to these places to have sex, to pay for it. It is a problem. And it used to be a case when I was running for office in the early 2000s that those were the most common fronts in the Southeast for human trafficking. I don't know what the data is right now, but in the early 2000s, the Janet Reno as the DOJ for Bill Clinton and then John Ashcroft ultimately wound up releasing the report because it came out just after George W. Bush got elected, pointed out that the Asian themed massage parlors in the Southeast United States, typically within 30 minutes of a military installation, tend to be places where men go, oftentimes targeting servicemen, to go and get serviced. And the money then flows to the Northwest and then over into the Asian black market, into the Asian mafia. And many of the women are human trafficking victims who are smuggled into this country. They are told that their families will be killed if they say anything, and that the police are their enemies and will rat them out, and they stay silent. And when I ran for office, I began to crack down on it and experienced the wrath of these people. I was getting harassed. I was getting threatened with lawsuits. I was getting threatened with being sued for defamation and slander and on and on and on, and pursued it nonetheless. Karen Handel, then the Secretary of State of Georgia, and then thereafter Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State, helped me tremendously and my city council draft regulations. One of the big takeaways from all of this was that a lot of these places, they rent from powerfully connected individuals. They rent spaces. So those powerfully connected individuals then lobby, or they're on city councils and they're opposed to the regulations. And that was a situation I ran into. And the argument was, well, we're going to be taking the police off this. And this is if it's really going on, it's consensual. Pay no attention to the human trafficking angle. And the police are just, we got crime. We don't need to go after prostitutes. We got crime. So the way we handled it is working with the Secretary of State's office. We did licensing, and we went with the licensing board. You know, you go round up all the legitimate massage owners, massage therapists in town, and they have things like working light bulbs in the ceiling and lists of clients, and they don't sleep at the premises. They don't do stuff like that. And so we just structured the rules around what credible massage therapists actually do. And a lot of the places closed up overnight. Over time, they've come back in as the city and county down in Bibb County and Macon merged and the old rules went away. They've started cropping back up, and they probably need to crack down on them again. But for a while, they pretty much overnight shut down. They did not want to keep logs of their visitors. They did not want to have rooms with light bulbs. They did not want to not have people sleeping on the premises. But over the years, the metrics have changed. The victims of human trafficking used to disproportionately and predominantly be Asian women coming into the United States. It is now American kids, boys and girls. Yes, boys too. The state of Georgia and the federal government have been cracking down on human trafficking in the state of Georgia. It is an issue near and dear to Marty Kemp, the First Lady of Georgia, and the governor as well. In 2021, Operation Not Forgotten kicked off a joint program between the U.S. Marshal Service and the Office of the Attorney General in Georgia. And they have made more, 20 children last month, 16 of whom were suspected of being victims of child sex trafficking. The Office of the Georgia Attorney General, working with the U.S. Marshals Missing Child Unit and Southeast Regional Task Force, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and Georgia state and local officials conducted the operation. According to Chris Carr, Georgia's Attorney General, being embedded through the duration of this op allows our prosecutors and investigators to build the strongest possible cases against buyers and traffickers, and allows our victim advocate to ensure those rescued get the critical rehabilitative resources they need. The operation was the third one. They haven't identified the children. They are minors. They will be kept private. And do you know the number one source of human trafficking in America today? Number one source: parents. Parents. I interviewed a girl a while back. Her father trafficked her. He would take her to hotels and rent her out on the internet. She was a star athlete at her school. The parents treated her younger sibling like an angel and her as the bad girl, and exploited her. And the mother was bullied into it and eventually went along with it and was complicit in helping it. And she finally was able to escape. Parents are the number one traffickers of their children into sex trafficking in this country, and it's horrific. It is also happening across the border with the number of illegal alien children coming into this country. They are exploited, and that in and of itself is horrific. And we should all be mindful of that, and we should crack down on it. We should continue to pursue this. And what is so interesting to me, what I find very fascinating, is that as this happens in the country now, and as it has become an issue in the church, a lot of Christian organizations out there are opposed to human trafficking, and they're fighting human trafficking and sex trafficking of kids in this country and prostitution. And there are a lot of progressive groups now, not all of them, but there are a growing number of progressive groups like, well, this is just a moral contagion. This is a social panic. It's not really happening. It's a moral panic. There's not really a big deal. It's overstated. They're just trying to get people worked up. And actually, no. I tell you again, over a dozen children who were suspected victims of sex trafficking have been rescued in metro Atlanta over a 2-week period in May. 20 children, 16 of whom were suspected of being victims of child sex trafficking, were rescued. It is a big deal. Do not listen to those. And thankfully, most progressive and conservative groups alike agree this is a terrible issue. And oftentimes it happens at motels along the interstate. There was a horrific story here, I guess, last year here in Atlanta, where 2 different hotels, it turned out that the hotel employees were being paid by the traffickers to keep a lookout and help them. In fact, in one case, a child escaped and went to the front desk and begged for help from the person working the front desk. And the person working the front desk told the kid that he would call the police, and wound up calling up to the room and telling them they had an escapee. That person's going to jail too. Awful that this happens in the 21st century. And please, be mindful of this, and be mindful of the fact that governors around the country, I'm really proud of my governor, Brian Kemp, here in Georgia, but other governors, Democrat and Republican, and attorneys general around the country, Democrat and Republican, are finally realizing this actually is an issue, and it's something that needs to be paid attention to, and they should be commended for doing so. Really am appreciative of the bipartisan support for stamping this stuff out, the bipartisan support for serious crackdowns in the states on human trafficking. It is a terrible issue, made worse by the fact that so many American kids are being exploited by their parents in our fallen, depraved society.